You know, the president just sent a budget up to Congress of $1.6 trillion. Yet, in 1991, the last year that we have knowledge of what America took in taxes, America took in a little over $1 trillion in taxes, which means that if the budget this year or next year is going to be $1.6 trillion, then where will the $600 billion come from to satisfy the budget? At this rate, if America cuts taxes and yet is increasing its budget, by the time Clinton leaves office, if he only has one term, the country will be $6 trillion in debt. At $4 trillion in debt, to pay the interest on that debt in 1991 was $288 billion, nearly 1/3 of what the government took in taxes. If the debt reaches $6 trillion, practically every penny that comes in tax revenue will have to be paid to service the debt, which technically means that the country will be bankrupt. This condition of great debt has placed America at the mercy of those to whom she is indebted. On page 47 of this same book, They Dare Call It Conspiracy, by Gary Allen and Mr. Abraham, it reads, listen, quote, "Since the keystone of the international banking empire has been government bonds, it has been in the interest of these international bankers to encourage government debt. The higher the debt, the more the interest. And nothing drives governments into debt like a war. And it has not been an uncommon practice among international bankers to finance both sides of the bloodiest military conflicts. For example, during the Civil War, the American North was financed by Rothschild through their American agent, August Belmont. And the American South was financed through the Erlangers, who were Rothschild's relatives. But while wars and revolutions have been used by international bankers in gaining or increasing control over governments, the key to such control has always been control of money. You can control a government if you have that government in your debt. A creditor is in a position to demand the privileges of monopoly from the sovereign. Oh man, this is heavy stuff. Governments that are seeking money have granted monopolies in state banking, natural resources, oil concessions, and transportation to the bankers. However, the monopoly which the international financiers most covet is to gain control over a nation's money. Eventually, these international bankers actually owned as private corporations the central bank of various European nations. The Bank of England, the Bank of France, the Bank of Germany were not owned by their respective governments, as almost everyone imagined. They were privately owned monopolies granted by the head of state, usually in return for loans. Under this system, observed Reginald McKenna, president of the Midlands Bank of England, he said, quote, "Those that create and issue the money and credit direct the policies of government and hold in their hands the destiny of the people."
Go ahead, Minister, go ahead.
Now, most of you think, most Americans think, that the Federal Reserve banking system is owned by the federal government as the representatives of the American people. But the Federal Reserve Bank is a privately owned banking institution. On page 59 of this same book, it reads, "The Federal Reserve controls our money supply and interest rates and thereby manipulates the entire economy, creating inflation or deflation, recession or boom, sending the stock market up or down at whim. The Federal Reserve is so powerful that the former Congressman Wright Patman, who was the former chairman of the House Banking Committee, said, in the United States, we have in effect two governments. We have the duly constituted government, then we have an independent, uncontrolled, uncoordinated government in the Federal Reserve System operating the money powers which are reserved to Congress by the Constitution. Neither presidents, nor congressmen, nor secretaries of the Treasury direct the Federal Reserve. In the matters of money, the Federal Reserve directs them." This was written about 30 years ago. Well, is it so today? Recently, the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, Mr. Alan Greenspan, came before Congress to hint to the Congress that the Fed would raise interest rates again. So for the 7th time in a year, interest rates have been raised. The chairman of the board of General Motors and Ford is now seeking an audience with Mr. Greenspan to plead with him not to raise the interest rates any further. And if Mr. Greenspan agrees, this will be the first time, according to what we have read, that the Federal Reserve has agreed to sit down directly with the heads of business. The Federal Reserve sits down with the heads of government.
Go ahead, Minister, go ahead.
Why would business plead to the Federal Reserve not to raise interest rates? Why couldn't Congress order the Federal Reserve not to raise the interest rates? If you watch Congress, when they deal with Mr. Greenspan, they don't play with him, because Mr. Greenspan is the representative of a shadow government that literally dictates the monetary policies of this nation. Now, do you remember a few weeks ago when the Mexican peso was in trouble? Against the wishes of the American people and the Congress, President Clinton ordered $20 billion of the American taxpayers' money to be used to bail out the peso. But who was President Clinton helping? Was he acting on his own? Or was he being directed by powerful forces that the American people don't know anything about? According to what we have read, the bailout don't save the common Mexican peasant. The bailout doesn't save the poor businessman of Mexico. It saves the international bankers who have invested heavily in Mexico. Who ordered the bailout? Since the president is supposed to act on the will of the American people, and the American people said no, and the Congress said no, who told Clinton, you better do it? You know, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad told us that the Prime Minister of England may appear to be the leader, but he goes back behind the door to unseen forces that direct his motion. And believe it or not, so it is with the American president. The American people feel that voting for the president is voting for the man who has supreme power to direct the course of this nation for the next 4 years. But there's another power in America called the Federal Reserve that is a power unto themselves. How did the control of the federal banking system come into private control against the wishes of the founding fathers of the nation? And what was written in the Constitution, and what was the purpose of that? Have you noticed how politicians bow to people with money? Well, what makes you think that your vote counts? It is money that buys political influence and oftentimes political elections. It is money, special interests that dictate in a large measure the vote of politicians in city council, in state legislature, and in the federal government of the United States. It is the big international bankers who are in control of many of the world's governments. But how did this happen to America? The financial woes of this country produce a ripple effect throughout the earth. The financial woes of America are causing the undoing of the social fabric of this nation. The people are grossly dissatisfied with the politics and the politicians of America. The people are wondering how the president and the Congress could loan money to other governments and give money away with the infrastructure of this nation crumbling and the debt is spiraling. How could America give away money when the country is in need? There are millions of homeless people living under bridges. Brothers and sisters, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, in saying that when America went off the gold and silver standard, her financial doom was sealed, this is a very big statement, because the financial doom of a nation brings down its government. When Germany lost the value of the German mark, the government went down right behind it. Whoever and for whatever reason, America was taken away from the gold and silver standard that made her financial doom something that is bound to happen, then those same traitors are responsible for ultimately bringing about the ruin of the government of the United States. Now, let's close. Don't move, don't move. Did you